Here's the two candidates battling for the seat in the U.S. House of Representatives. First, welcome the man who currently holds that seat in District 2, Congressman Sanford Bishop.
Hello. Glad to be with you.
Also, his opponent, retired Colonel John House. John?
Thanks for having us here, Chuck, and thank you to the viewing audience.
Sure. Now, before we dive in, let's give you some background on both men. First, Congressman Bishop. He is a Democrat born in Mobile who is now serving his 10th term in Georgia's 2nd District. That district covers 32 counties in southwest Georgia. He is a graduate of Morehouse College and the Emory University Law School. Mr. Bishop served in the Army, is married to Vivian Bishop. They have a daughter and a granddaughter. Now, John House. He's a retired Army colonel and Republican, born in Columbus. Mr. House currently runs a small business specializing in Defense Department consulting. He's a graduate of Auburn University, the University of Kansas, and the U.S. Army Command and General Staff College. John House is married to his high school sweetheart, Marilyn, and they have 4 daughters. Well, let's remind you that this is a discussion more than an actual debate. There are no time limits, but we ask that the candidates be considerate of each other so that we can get to as many questions as possible. We wish we had more time. Our first question centers on the struggling economy. A lot of families in this area are hurting right now, many out of work, others having trouble making ends meet. Now, some blame the failure to solve these problems on a disconnect between the two major parties. What would you do to improve the dialogue in Congress? John House?
You know, Chuck, I spent 26 years in the Army working with soldiers from about every background you might imagine, either having them work for me or working for them. And I think that experience in solving problems and sorting out how to move forward in a variety of situations will help me find common ground so we can move forward, because you're right, it's wrong that the Congress has not been able to move forward as a group, because that's their job.
Is that a correct assessment, dialogue in Congress?
Oh, absolutely. I think that more collegiality and the ability to communicate with one another is certainly important. Unfortunately, over the last 2 to 3 years, Congress has gotten to the point where members are angry and don't talk to one another. That's unfortunate. We have got to be able to dialogue across party lines. Of course, I have been always willing and have reached across party lines. Just recently working with Senator Saxby Chambliss and Senator Johnny Isaacson on the sequester problem, dealing with our fiscal crisis and the impact that it could have on our military. Just one example. But of course, I've reached across the aisle, worked with colleagues in agriculture. I worked with the Military Family Congressional Caucus, the Chicken Caucus, and many of the other caucuses where we have common interests, common issues that affect both Democrats and Republicans, our constituencies that have common issues.
Let's go on to our second question. Columbus is a huge military town, to include active personnel and those who have retired here. Now, many of those veterans are unhappy with the way they're being treated by the government. In fact, a group in Columbus held a rally last week to discuss those concerns. What is your take on their displeasure, Congressman Bishop?
Well, I think that the government should be user-friendly. When I was in school, we grew up believing that the government should be of the people, by the people, and for the people. We've found, and as adults, that that's not always true, and so I wanted to make it my job as a servant of the people to make this government be user-friendly. I serve on the Veterans Subcommittee, the Military Construction and Veterans Affairs Subcommittee of the Appropriations Committee, and in that capacity, we have been able to, over the last 4 years, give the largest increase in benefits for our veterans in the history of the Veterans Administration. Their benefits, and particularly with those veterans who are returning from Iraq and Afghanistan, have the 9/11 GI Bill, which is transferable to family members.
Let's get Mr. House's take on this now. I think many of these veterans would like a VA hospital locally.
Well, they absolutely would, Chuck, and I can't understand why we don't have one. If you look at the number of veterans that are here versus elsewhere, I don't understand why we don't have a VA hospital. This is one of them. Certainly veterans' major concerns, and something that I want to try to push. I mean, we need to have better health care for veterans here, and we have issues in Albany as well. I mean, I've had veterans that are in the mental health program down there that tell me if they don't show up for the first come, first serve process and get left out, that they then wind up losing some VA benefits even though they're there, but there are not enough health care providers to service them. Things like that have got to stop, and that's what I want to work on, because as a veteran, I'm worried about it a lot.
Thank you both for your comments on that. We're watching a special edition of our 5:30 newscast. After the break, we're back with viewer questions in our debate. Welcome back. We want to get right to our viewers' questions now. John House, Congressman Bishop, has been vocal about questioning the validity of your being an Army veteran. We actually received a question about this, and it reads this way. Tim asks, how do you regain credibility with veterans after misrepresenting yourself for the past 20 years? And I'll add to that. Do you feel you misrepresented yourself?
Absolutely not. I've always been accurate. I did basic ROTC training at Fort Benning in June of 1969, completed that and went on to advanced ROTC at Georgia State University. I proceeded in advanced ROTC to get a commission, got my branch assignment, but I failed the commissioning physical, and I was given an honorable discharge from the United States Army in February of 1911. That has been on my list. I'm sorry, of 1971, excuse me, 1971. And
you're not as old as 1971.
No, I'm not. You're right. You're right. You're absolutely right. But in 1971, I got the honorable discharge from the United States Army, and of course, I've been happy to display it after I was questioned by Mr. House. But I served in the Army, and I have an Army discharge.
Your thoughts, Mr. House?
Title 38 of the U.S. Code says you have to serve on active duty. I've got one of those honorable discharges as well when I finished ROTC, because I left the inactive reserve, because as an ROTC cadet, that's what you're in. So I would say Mr. Bishop is not an Army veteran by the definition in Title 38.
Let's go to another viewer question now. Sherry says, I would like the candidates to explain what the role of the federal government is as defined by the Constitution of the United States. Mr. House, I believe you lead on this one.
I think the federal government's there to protect us from someone that might try to harm us, but it's there really to stay out of our lives. I think part of our problem today is as we get a larger and larger government, that the government is intruding in our lives more and more. And that worries me. You know, in fact, the major complaint that I've heard as I've traveled around the district has been about federal regulation, which is one of the ways that the government reaches in and affects our lives. So I think we need to reduce regulation, and that's one of my primary goals when I get there, is to do what I can to make regulation decrease in its impact so that it'll be easier to work and lead local governments or anything else that you have to do. Because really, I get that complaint from farmers, businessmen, and politicians.
Congressman Bishop, your thoughts?
I believe that the government is there to create an atmosphere so that individuals and communities can realize their full potential. And of course, whenever the government gets in the way of that through excessive regulations, such as the EPA, I think that it's our duty to try to make sure that those are limited. And of course, I have been a part, not planning to do, but I've actually been involved in helping to reduce those regulations. My legislative record will demonstrate that I have, in fact, supported elimination of senseless regulations. And I believe that there should be one simple rule, and that is that regulations, before they implemented, should be based in sound science. They should be subjected to a cost-benefit analysis, and they should make common sense. Those are the standards by which I measure regulation. I think that we ought to employ.
I think we have time for one more viewer question. This one comes from Daryl, who wants to know, why is it so hard for uninsured people to get health care assistance in Georgia after becoming disabled, even though they paid into the system? Insurance is a big question these days, Congressman Bishop.
Well, with regard to the Social Security Administration or the Veterans Administration, unfortunately, because of policies that have been put in place by those who want to reduce the size in government, it means that they have fewer personnel to process those claims. And in some instances, there are cases where the government has not been user-friendly. They don't have good customer service. But by and large, there are more claimants than there are the capacity for the employees to actually process those claims. And in many of our government agencies, whether it's immigration or whether it's disability, you have backlogs, and that has to stop, and we need to streamline that process. And so I would agree with the questioner, the person who posed that question, that we need to streamline that and we need to make it more efficient.
I'm guessing your answer is going to be similar, Mr. House.
Except that I would add that I think federal regulation has complicated so many processes, it makes it very difficult for anybody to work through them. And I think it's important for the congressman and his staff to be aware of those types of issues and to have sufficient expertise to help out the local constituents so that they can resolve those problems without a doubt.
All right, we want to give both candidates a chance for some final thoughts, a last effort to tell you, the voter, why you should cast your ballot for them. We'll begin with John House?
Well, I would say, as you've heard tonight, and Mr. Bishop is very satisfied with his record and his performance. So if you're satisfied with that performance, then you should thank him, without a doubt. But if you want to see some type of change happen, because if your situation or the situations that your family and friends face is such that you want to see a difference, then you ought to vote for me, because I'm the person that's going to go in and try to make a change. And the other thing to remember, I am the only person that's actually smells smoke on the battlefield, and we are still in a war, and that's not going away anytime real soon. And my youngest daughter's in the Army as well, so I understand what that means. And certainly in a town like Columbus, that's on a lot of people's minds.
And I believe your wife said your daughter's about to deploy.
Yeah, pretty soon. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank
House. Mr. Bishop, Congressman Bishop.
Thank you. God has blessed me and has ordered the steps of my life and blessed me with tools, a great education experience as a lawyer, 14 years of experience in the State House, 2 in the State Senate, helping me to learn the legislative process on that level, and then to use that experience to go to Washington and to serve the people of the 2nd Congressional District for now almost 20 years in that legislative process. These are tools which I have been able to utilize to effectively deliver resources for the people of the 2nd Congressional District. This is an opportunity for me to reapply for a job, and we have 2 candidates with resumes. I would expect that the voters will look at those resumes, and I have great confidence in the wisdom of the voters that they will look at the background, the training, and see who is best prepared to lead them and to deliver for them continuing in the job as 2nd Congressional District Congressman. I look forward to continuing that service, and I ask that they would renew my contract.
We thank you both for joining us. We have a little bit more after a short break. Bishop, you've been elected or re-elected 10 times. To what do you attribute that?
Well, I'd like to think that it was a result of my giving good account for my stewardship and being able to deliver for the people of the 2nd Congressional District. I've worked hard. I've tried to work for and in behalf of the people of the 2nd Congressional District. And the fact that they have returned me 10 times I think reflects the fact that they thought that I have served them well. I'd like to continue serving them, and I'm asking them again to renew my contract for another 2 years.
And that map of the 2nd District has been drawn, redrawn, and redrawn again, right?
Yes, it has.
Congressman House, any final thoughts on that?
Well, my thoughts are what I already said. I mean, if you're better off now than you were 20 years ago when Mr. Bishop began, because he's had 20 years to get it right, whatever right is in your view, then you should thank him. But if you're not better off, if you think you ought to have something better and you want to change, then you should put me up there so you have somebody else working for you, because I think we need somebody that puts people before politics.
Our thanks. Again, we thank both of our candidates for joining us for our first local debate here in our Stories this political season. We'd like to remind you we will have another debate here Monday, October 22nd. That one will be between the candidates for Muskogee County Sheriff, John Darr and Mark LaJoy. Again, we hope you can join us at 5:30 on October 26th for that debate, and stay tuned next for the news at 6 o'clock.